The phone call came at 9:30 on a Tuesday evening, just as I was settling into my couch with a cup of chamomile tea. My mother's voice carried that particular sweetness she reserved for delivering devastating news. "Holly, sweetheart, I have some unfortunate information about our annual Clearwater Mountain retreat." My stomach dropped. For 15 consecutive years, I had never missed this family tradition. "There simply won't be enough space for you this year, dear. It's become quite intimate." Intimate. The word echoed in my mind as my world began crumbling around me. I barely slept that night. By 6 in the morning, I was pacing my Denver apartment, replaying every word of that conversation. My mother had been vague about the details, mentioning something about limited accommodations and a smaller gathering this year. But something felt wrong. Terribly wrong. I grabbed my phone and dialed Madison, my youngest sister. She had always been the most transparent among my 5 siblings, often sharing information without considering the consequences. If anyone would accidentally reveal the truth, it would be her. "Madison, hey, it's Holly. Mom mentioned the retreat is going to be smaller this year?" "Smaller?" Madison's voice pitched higher with confusion. "Holly, they've invited over 100 people. Dad's been bragging about it for weeks. They rented out the entire premium lodge section at Clearwater Resort, plus 3 additional cabins, and even booked the main event hall." My tea mug slipped from my hands, shattering against the hardwood floor. 100 people, premium accommodations. This wasn't about space limitations. "Madison, are you sure about those numbers?" "Absolutely. I've seen the guest list myself. All 5 of us siblings are bringing our families, plus our in-laws, second cousins from Phoenix, Dad's old college buddies, even some of their family friends from the country club. Oh, and remember Derek's new girlfriend, Sarah? She's invited too." Derek. My ex-husband. The man I'd divorced 8 months ago after discovering his affair with a coworker. They invited my cheating ex-husband but told me there wasn't enough space. "Wait, Derek is going?" I managed to keep my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "Oh yeah, Mom and Dad specifically requested his presence. They said something about him giving a speech during the opening ceremony about family values. Isn't that sweet?" He's really become such an important part of our family tradition. Family values. A speech about family values from the man who destroyed our marriage by sleeping with his secretary in our bed while I was visiting my dying grandmother in the hospital. "Madison, did Mom and Dad say anything else about why I'm not invited?" There was a long pause. Too long. "Holly, they told everyone you wouldn't be joining us this year. Not that you couldn't, but that you wouldn't. Everyone assumed you made that choice yourself." My heart pounded as the reality crystallized. This wasn't about space constraints or smaller accommodations. My parents had deliberately excluded me from the most important family gathering of the year, then lied to everyone about it being my decision. Did they give any reason for thinking I wouldn't want to come? Another pause. "They mentioned something about you needing time to focus on your personal healing journey after the divorce. They said it would be better for everyone if you used this time for self-reflection instead of potentially causing uncomfortable situations." Potentially causing uncomfortable situations. Translation. They were afraid I might confront Derek about his betrayal in front of their precious guests. After hanging up with Madison, I immediately opened social media to investigate further. Derek's Instagram account, which I'd blocked months ago but could still view through a friend's phone, revealed the depth of this betrayal. Posted just 2 hours earlier was a photo of him and Sarah at some upscale Denver restaurant, with the caption, "Preparing for an amazing weekend, celebrating family traditions and new beginnings. Grateful for the Martinez family's continued support and love." The Martinez family's continued support. He was using our family name, my family name, to represent himself as some sort of honored family member, while I sat alone in my apartment, excluded from my own family's gathering. I scrolled through the comments on his post. My cousin Jennifer had written, "Can't wait to hear your speech this weekend. The family is so lucky to have someone with your integrity and wisdom." My uncle Robert added, "Looking forward to your presentation about strong family foundations, Derek. You're exactly the kind of leader this family needs." Leader. They were positioning my lying, cheating ex-husband as a family leader while casting me aside like damaged goods. The final blow came when I discovered a comment from my own father. "Derek, son, your insights about commitment and responsibility will be exactly what our family business partners need to hear. Thank you for stepping up when others have stepped away. When others have stepped away. My father was publicly suggesting that I had abandoned the family, rather than admitting they had abandoned me. But the most devastating discovery was yet to come. As I continued scrolling through family members' social media posts, I found a photo Madison had shared 3 days earlier from what appeared to be a family planning meeting. The image showed all 5 of my siblings seated around my parents' dining room table, with notebooks and papers spread across the surface. The caption read, "Amazing family planning session for our biggest retreat ever. So grateful when family comes together to make important decisions." I had not been invited to this planning meeting. My own family had gathered to organize an event that would deliberately exclude me, and they had done so without even informing me such a meeting was taking place. The crushing realization hit me like a physical blow. This exclusion had been carefully planned and coordinated among my entire family. It wasn't a spontaneous decision about space limitations. It was a calculated choice to remove me from our most sacred family tradition while elevating the man who had betrayed and humiliated me. By 8 that morning, I was sitting in my office at Martinez Family Event Management, the family business that my grandfather had started 50 years ago and that I had helped build into Denver's premier event coordination company. My title was Senior Event Coordinator, and I had spent the last 7 years developing relationships with vendors, managing high-profile clients, and creating the systems that made our company successful. As I opened my computer and began reviewing my current project files, a horrifying realization emerged. For the past 6 weeks, I had been working on logistics for something called Private Family Gathering, Clearwater Mountain Resort. I had coordinated vendor contracts, arranged transportation, managed catering requirements, and handled accommodation bookings for a large-scale event. I had been unknowingly organizing the logistics for my own exclusion. My hands trembled as I opened the project folder and reviewed the documents I had created. Transportation arrangements for 115 guests. Catering for a 3-day event with premium menu selections. Coordination with Clearwater Resort's luxury suite section. Private helicopter tours for VIP guests. Spa services for all female attendees. A sound system rental for presentations and speeches. Every detail I had meticulously planned was for the family retreat that I had been banned from attending. The office door opened, and my brother Tommy walked in carrying a coffee and wearing the satisfied expression of someone who felt superior to everyone around him. Tommy worked in the family business's financial division, handling accounts and budgets for our larger events. "Holly, great work on the Clearwater project. Dad's really impressed with the vendor coordination. The helicopter tours were a brilliant addition." "Tommy, I didn't realize this was for our family retreat." His expression shifted from satisfaction to discomfort. "Oh, yeah, I guess nobody mentioned that detail to you." "Why would nobody mention that detail to me?" Tommy sat down across from my desk, suddenly looking like a child who had been caught breaking something valuable. "Holly, look, there was a family meeting about this retreat, and we had to make some difficult decisions." "What kind of decisions?" "Whether to include you this year. Given everything that happened with Derek, and the wedding incident, and some other concerns, we voted on it." The wedding incident. 3 months earlier at our cousin Lisa's wedding, I had confronted Derek publicly when he approached me during the reception, drunk and trying to convince me to give our marriage another chance. During that confrontation, Derek had become belligerent and started shouting about how our divorce was hurting his relationships with my family. In defending myself, I had mentioned some of Derek's financial irresponsibility during our marriage, including his habit of using business credit cards for personal expenses. Apparently, that public confrontation had embarrassed my family enough to exclude me from future gatherings. "Tommy, you held a vote about whether to include me in our family retreat?" "It wasn't personal, Holly. It was practical. We were concerned about potential drama, especially with Derek being there, and especially with some of Dad's business associates attending this year." Business associates. This retreat wasn't just a family gathering, it was a business networking event, and my family had decided that my presence might jeopardize their professional relationships. "How did the vote turn out?" Tommy shifted uncomfortably in his chair. 4 siblings voted against, including you. Madison abstained. Mom and Dad made the final decision based on those results. 4 against 1 abstention. My own brothers and sisters had voted to exclude me from our family's most important tradition. "Tommy, what business associates are attending?" "Some potential investors Dad's been courting. a few partners from other event management companies, some wealthy clients who might expand their business with us. Dad wanted to showcase our family's stability and professionalism. Stability and professionalism. Apparently, my presence would undermine both of those qualities in the eyes of business prospects. And Derek fits into this professional showcase how exactly? Tommy's discomfort deepened. Well, Derek's been working with Dad on some new business development ideas. He's got experience in corporate management, and he understands our family dynamics really well. Derek had been working with our father on business development. My ex-husband had been building professional relationships with my family, while I remained completely unaware of these collaborations. What kind of business development, Tommy? Look, Holly, I probably shouldn't be discussing this with you. Dad wants to keep some of these new directions confidential until after the retreat. Confidential from me. My own family was developing business strategies in secret, excluding me from decisions that would affect my professional future. Tommy, I'm the senior event coordinator for this company. Why would business development be kept confidential from me? The question hung in the air as Tommy struggled to find an answer that wouldn't sound as cruel as the truth. Finally, he stood up and moved toward the door. Holly, maybe you should talk to Dad about your role here. There have been some concerns about your focus and reliability since the divorce. Concerns about my focus and reliability. They were questioning my professional competence based on my personal life, while simultaneously working with the man who had destroyed that personal life. After Tommy left, I sat alone in my office trying to process the magnitude of this betrayal. My family had not only excluded me from our most important tradition but had done so through a formal voting process. They had positioned my ex-husband as a business asset while treating me as a professional liability. They had made business decisions that would affect my career while keeping those decisions secret from me. But the deepest cut was the realization that 4 of my 5 siblings had actively voted against my inclusion. These were people I had supported through their own divorces, job losses, and personal struggles. I had coordinated their wedding events, helped plan their children's birthday parties, and provided professional services to their personal projects at family rates. And when given the choice between supporting me and avoiding potential discomfort, 4 of them had chosen to cast me aside. The phone rang, interrupting my spiral of pain and anger. The caller ID showed Derek's number. Holly, I heard you might be confused about the retreat arrangements this year. Confused? Your mom mentioned you seemed upset about the space limitations. I wanted you to know that I advocated for including you, but the family felt it would be better for everyone if you took some time to focus on your personal growth. Derek was calling to console me about my exclusion from my own family gathering, while simultaneously positioning himself as my advocate. The audacity was breathtaking. Derek, what exactly is your role at this retreat? Well, your parents asked me to give a presentation about maintaining strong family relationships during challenging times. They felt my perspective on commitment and forgiveness might be valuable for some of the younger family members. A presentation about commitment and forgiveness from a man who had cheated on his wife and abandoned his marriage vows. My parents had replaced me at our family retreat with a speech from the person who had betrayed me most deeply. But Derek wasn't finished. Holly, I also wanted you to know that I've been working with your father on some exciting business opportunities. Nothing's finalized yet, but there might be a chance for me to contribute more formally to the family company in the future. My ex-husband was positioning himself to take over my role in the family business. What kind of formal contribution? Oh, just some ideas about expanding the company's reach, improving client relationships, maybe developing some new service offerings. Your dad thinks my corporate background could be really valuable. Derek's corporate background consisted of middle management positions at companies he had left under questionable circumstances. But apparently, my family viewed his limited experience as more valuable than my 7 years of building the event management business. As I hung up the phone, the final piece of this betrayal crystallized. This wasn't just about excluding me from a family retreat. This was about replacing me entirely with the man who had destroyed my marriage, using my own family business as the mechanism for that replacement. That afternoon, I drove to my parents' house in the affluent Highlands Ranch suburb where I had grown up. Their sprawling colonial home sat on 2 acres of meticulously maintained lawn, representing the success of the family business that I had helped build. As I pulled into the circular driveway, I noticed Derek's silver BMW parked next to my father's truck. My ex-husband was already here, apparently comfortable enough to treat my childhood home as his personal residence. I approached the front door, but before I could ring the doorbell, I heard voices coming from the backyard patio. My parents were clearly engaged in an animated conversation with someone, and their tone suggested this was a business discussion rather than casual conversation. I walked around the side of the house, staying close to the hedge line where I could observe without being seen. My parents sat at their outdoor dining table with Derek and a woman I didn't recognize but assumed must be Sarah, his new girlfriend. Papers were spread across the table, and my father was gesturing enthusiastically while speaking. "Derek, your presentation outline looks fantastic. The section about responsible leadership during family transitions will resonate perfectly with our potential investors." Responsible leadership during family transitions. They were framing my divorce as a transition that Derek had navigated responsibly, while I had presumably handled it irresponsibly. My mother leaned forward, her voice carrying the warmth she typically reserved for her favorite child. "And Sarah, we're so excited to have you join us this weekend. Your marketing background will be invaluable for some of the business discussions we're planning." Sarah, Derek's girlfriend, apparently possessed marketing expertise that my family found valuable enough to include in their business discussions. Derek's voice carried a confidence I had rarely heard during our marriage. "I really appreciate the opportunity to contribute to the family business in a more formal capacity. My experience with corporate restructuring and team management could help Martinez family events expand into new markets." Corporate restructuring and team management. Derek was positioning himself as someone capable of managing business operations, despite having no experience in event coordination or client relations. "Derek," my father continued, "I've been thinking about your suggestion regarding the Director of Family Relations position. Having someone with your understanding of family dynamics and business operations could really help us grow our corporate client base." Director of Family Relations. They were creating a position specifically for Derek that would essentially replace my role as the primary family business coordinator. Sarah spoke up for the first time, her voice professionally polished. "Mr. Martinez, I've reviewed some of your company's social media presence and client testimonials. With a few strategic adjustments and some targeted marketing campaigns, I think we could increase your booking rates by at least 30% within the first year." My parents were being courted by Derek and Sarah as a business development team, while I remained completely unaware of these negotiations. My mother's response made my stomach turn. "Sarah, that sounds wonderful. We've been concerned about some inconsistencies in our marketing approach lately. Having someone with your professional background could really help us present a more polished image." Inconsistencies in our marketing approach. I had been managing our company's marketing and client relations for years, apparently unsuccessfully according to my mother's assessment. The conversation continued, but I heard Derek mention something that made my blood run cold. "I really think the retreat will be the perfect opportunity to introduce these new directions to the extended family and business associates. Once everyone sees the presentation and understands our vision for the company's future, I'm confident they'll support the leadership transition." Leadership transition. Derek was planning to use our family retreat as a platform to announce his assumption of leadership roles within my family business. But the conversation took an even more sinister turn when my father lowered his voice and said, "Derek, I appreciate you sharing your concerns about Holly's work performance over the past year. Some of the client feedback you've mentioned really helps us understand why some projects haven't met our usual standards." Client feedback. Derek had been providing my father with negative information about my professional performance, apparently citing fabricated complaints from clients I had worked with successfully. "Well, Mr. Martinez, I don't want to speak negatively about Holly, but during our marriage, I witnessed some concerning patterns in her work habits. She often seemed overwhelmed by complex projects, and there were times when her emotional state affected her decision-making abilities. Derek was lying about my professional competence, using his intimate knowledge of my personal life to create false narratives about my work capabilities." Sarah added her perspective. "From a business standpoint, it's really important to have team members who can maintain professionalism even during personal challenges. Emotional volatility can be very damaging to client relationships." Emotional volatility. They were characterizing my normal human response to discovering my husband's infidelity as a professional liability that threatened our business operations. My mother nodded knowingly. "We've definitely noticed some changes in Holly's approach since the divorce. She seems less focused, more defensive when we offer suggestions, and sometimes her judgment about client needs seems questionable. Less focused and more defensive. My parents were reinterpreting my appropriate professional boundaries and my resistance to their micromanagement as evidence of declining competence. The final blow came when my father said, "Derek, I think your plan to formally announce the new business structure during the retreat is perfect. Having our family and business associates witness your introduction as Director of Family Relations will establish your authority clearly. And frankly, it will help everyone understand that the company is moving in a more stable direction." Moving in a more stable direction. My father was publicly positioning Derek's involvement as a correction for instability that I had apparently created. Derek responded with false humility. "I just want what's best for the Martinez family and the business. If my experience can help protect the company's reputation and support the family's financial future, I'm honored to contribute in any way I can." Protect the company's reputation. Derek was suggesting that my continued involvement in the family business posed a threat to our professional standing and financial success. As I listened to this conversation from behind the hedge, I realized the true scope of what was happening. Derek wasn't just attending our family retreat as a guest. He was using the retreat as a platform to publicly assume control of my professional life while simultaneously destroying my reputation within my own family. My parents weren't just excluding me from a family tradition. They were actively participating in a coordinated effort to replace me with my ex-husband in both family and business contexts. And they were doing it with apparent enthusiasm and gratitude, convinced that Derek represented stability and professionalism, while I represented volatility and incompetence. The betrayal wasn't just personal anymore. It was professional, financial, and designed to systematically erase me from both my family relationships and my livelihood. I drove home in a daze, my mind struggling to process the conversation I had overheard. By the time I reached my apartment, rage had replaced shock, and I was determined to understand the full extent of Derek's manipulation and my family's betrayal. I spent the next 4 hours using my access to the family business systems to investigate the true scope of this conspiracy. As senior event coordinator, I had administrative privileges that allowed me to review contracts, budgets, and communication records for all company projects. What I discovered was worse than I had imagined. The Clearwater Mountain retreat wasn't just expensive, it was extravagant beyond anything our family had ever planned. The total budget exceeded $80,000, including luxury accommodations at $500 per night per room, premium catering services at $150 per person per meal, private helicopter tours at $2,000 per flight, and spa services for all guests at $300 per person. $80,000 for a weekend retreat, while my parents had claimed they couldn't afford the additional cost of including one more family member. But the budget revealed something even more disturbing. Derek had been involved in the planning process for over 2 months, with email records showing regular communication between him and my father about vendor selection, menu choices, and activity planning. Derek had been helping plan this retreat while I remained completely unaware that it was our family gathering. I found email threads between Derek and various family members, all dated within the past 6 weeks. In these messages, Derek positioned himself as someone working closely with my parents on business matters and family coordination. He referenced private conversations with my father about company strategy and mentioned insights he had gained about our clients and business operations. Derek had been presenting himself as an insider with intimate knowledge of our family business, using information he had gathered during our marriage to demonstrate his value to my family's operations. But the most damaging discovery was a folder labeled Personnel Concerns, Confidential, that I found in my father's business files. This folder contained documents that Derek had apparently provided to my parents, outlining what he described as professional development needs for various family business employees. The largest section focused on me. Derek had created a detailed report titled Holly Martinez, Performance Analysis and Recommendations. In this document, he cited specific examples of what he claimed were professional shortcomings I had demonstrated during our marriage. He mentioned times when I had discussed work stress at home, characterizing these conversations as evidence that I was overwhelmed by job responsibilities. He referenced occasions when I had expressed frustration with difficult clients, presenting these normal professional challenges as signs of poor client relationship management. Most devastatingly, Derek had included a section about my mental health, documenting my decision to begin therapy after discovering his affair and my brief use of antidepressant medication to manage the emotional trauma of our divorce. He presented this information as evidence of emotional instability that could affect professional judgment and client confidence. Derek had turned my appropriate response to his betrayal into ammunition against my professional reputation. The report included specific recommendations for addressing performance concerns, including reduced responsibility for high-profile clients, increased supervision of project management, and consideration of alternative roles that better match current capabilities. Derek had provided my parents with a blueprint for systematically dismantling my position in the family business. But there was more. I found evidence that Derek had been secretly recording conversations during our marriage, including discussions we had about family business strategies, client relationships, and operational challenges. These recordings were referenced in his report as documentation of concerning attitudes toward company priorities and family responsibilities. Derek had been gathering intelligence about our family business during our marriage, using intimate conversations between husband and wife as evidence to support his eventual takeover of my professional role. The folder also contained email exchanges between Derek and my father discussing Derek's qualifications for business leadership. In these messages, Derek had exaggerated his corporate experience, claiming expertise in areas where he had minimal knowledge. He had presented himself as someone with extensive background in family business dynamics and proven experience managing complex client relationships. None of these claims were true. Derek's work history consisted of middle management positions at companies he had left after personality conflicts with supervisors and colleagues. But my father had apparently accepted Derek's self-promotion without verification, responding to these emails with enthusiasm about Derek's potential contributions to our company. The most shocking discovery was evidence that Derek had already been given access to some of our business systems. Email records showed that he had been reviewing client files, vendor contracts, and financial reports for the past month. He had been studying our business operations in preparation for assuming formal responsibilities. Derek wasn't just planning to replace me, he was already replacing me, with my parents' full cooperation and encouragement. I found one final document that made my hands shake with fury. It was a draft announcement titled Martinez Family Events, Leadership Transition, apparently intended for distribution to our client base after the retreat. The announcement described Derek's appointment as Director of Family Relations and emphasized his extensive experience in corporate management and family business operations. It mentioned his deep understanding of the Martinez family values and his commitment to maintaining the highest standards of professionalism and client service. The announcement made no mention of my role in the company or my contributions to its success. It presented Derek's appointment as a natural expansion of leadership rather than a replacement of existing personnel. They were planning to erase me from the business I had helped build, using carefully crafted language that would make my departure appear voluntary rather than forced. As I sat in my apartment that night, surrounded by printed copies of Derek's manipulation and my family's betrayal, I realized that this conspiracy had been months in the planning. Derek hadn't just stumbled into this opportunity. He had systematically cultivated relationships with my family, gathered intelligence about our business operations, and created documentation to support his takeover of my professional life. My parents hadn't been deceived by Derek's manipulation. They had been willing participants in a plan to replace their own daughter with her ex-husband. And the family retreat wasn't just a celebration. It was Derek's coronation ceremony, designed to publicly establish his authority within my family and business while I sat alone in my apartment, completely excluded from my own life. After a sleepless night of processing the magnitude of Derek's manipulation, I woke up with a clarity that surprised me. Instead of drowning in victimhood, I found myself analyzing the situation with the same strategic thinking I used for complex event coordination projects. Derek had made several crucial mistakes in his carefully planned takeover of my life. First, he had underestimated my professional competence and the relationships I had built over 7 years in the event management industry. While he had been busy convincing my family that I was unreliable, I had been developing genuine partnerships with vendors, suppliers, and service providers throughout Colorado. Second, he had assumed that my administrative access to family business systems would be revoked before I could discover his schemes. But my parents had been so focused on their secret planning with Derek that they had forgotten to limit my legitimate business responsibilities. Third, Derek had positioned himself as indispensable to the retreat's success, without understanding that his authority was entirely dependent on systems and relationships that I controlled. I spent the morning making phone calls to vendors and suppliers who had worked with me on dozens of successful events. These were professional relationships I had cultivated through consistent communication, prompt payment, and collaborative problem-solving. They trusted me personally, not just the Martinez family business. My first call was to Patricia Williams, owner of Mountain Peak Catering, the company handling all food service for the retreat. "Patricia, it's Holly Martinez. I need to implement some updated security protocols for the Clearwater event this weekend." "Of course, Holly. What do you need?" "Due to some family business concerns that have emerged, I need to establish verification procedures for any changes to catering arrangements. No modifications should be implemented without direct confirmation from me personally." "Absolutely. I'll make sure my entire team knows that any changes must be approved through you first." I made similar calls to the transportation company, the spa services coordinator, the helicopter tour operator, and the resort's event management staff. In each conversation, I positioned these new protocols as standard security measures for high-profile family business events. None of these vendors questioned my authority. To them, I was the primary Martinez family contact they had worked with successfully for years. Derek was an unknown entity with no established professional relationships. My next step was to review the legal documentation for Derek's alleged business involvement. I discovered that despite months of planning and promises from my family, Derek had no official standing within our company. He wasn't listed as an employee, consultant, or contractor. His name appeared nowhere on our business registration, insurance policies, or legal documents. Derek's entire position within the family business was based on verbal promises and informal agreements that had no legal weight. I also discovered something that made me smile for the first time in days. As part of my regular financial monitoring responsibilities, I had access to all business account activity, including petty cash expenditures and credit card usage. Over the past 2 months, there had been a series of unusual expenses that I had noted, but hadn't investigated. Expensive dinners at upscale restaurants, premium gift purchases, and luxury service appointments. The charges were always just under the threshold that required additional authorization, and they were coded as client development or family business relations. But when I cross-referenced these expenses with Derek's social media posts and text messages I had discovered in our shared phone records from our marriage, I realized these charges corresponded exactly with Derek's courtship activities with my family. Derek had been using family business funds to pay for the expensive gifts and experiences he had been providing to my parents and siblings. The grateful appreciation my family felt toward Derek was based on generosity he was funding with money from our company accounts. Derek had been buying my family's loyalty using our own business resources. This discovery gave me significant leverage. Unauthorized personal use of business funds was embezzlement, regardless of the amounts involved. Derek's systematic misuse of company resources was documented and provable, but I decided to gather more evidence before taking action. I spent the afternoon reviewing security footage from our office building, which I could access as a senior employee responsible for facility management. The recordings showed Derek visiting our offices multiple times when I wasn't present, using access my father had apparently provided to review files and documents. These visits weren't documented in our visitor logs or authorized through proper business protocols. Derek had been conducting unsupervised investigations of our business operations without official permission or oversight. I had evidence of unauthorized access, misuse of business funds, and systematic manipulation of family relationships. But I also had something more valuable: complete control over the logistics that would determine whether Derek's retreat presentation succeeded or failed. Every vendor relationship, transportation arrangement, and service coordination for the retreat depended on systems and processes that I had created and managed. Derek had convinced my family that he could replace me, but he had never learned how to actually manage the complex logistics that made our events successful. By late afternoon, I had developed a comprehensive plan that would expose Derek's incompetence while demonstrating my own professional value. I would use the retreat weekend as an opportunity to reveal the truth about Derek's manipulation and my family's misguided decisions. But my plan required perfect timing and careful coordination. Derek was expecting to use the retreat as his coronation ceremony. Instead, I would turn it into his public humiliation while reclaiming my rightful position within my family and business. The key was ensuring that everything appeared to unfold naturally as a result of Derek's own limitations rather than my deliberate sabotage. I would give Derek exactly what he wanted: complete responsibility for managing an event he didn't understand, using relationships he had never developed, with systems he couldn't control. And when Derek's incompetence became apparent to my entire family and their business guests, I would be positioned as the only person capable of salvaging the situation. Derek had spent months positioning himself as my replacement. This weekend, he would discover whether he was actually capable of replacing me. Friday morning, the day of the retreat, I woke up at 5 and immediately began executing my plan. My first stop was Clearwater Resort, where I arrived as the official Martinez Family Events Coordinator an hour before Derek and the early guests were scheduled to check in. I met with Janet Harrison, the resort's event manager, who had worked with me on 6 previous family events over the past 4 years. "Janet, we've had some last-minute changes to our event management structure for this retreat. My business partner Derek will be handling some coordination responsibilities this weekend, but due to insurance and liability requirements, any major modifications to our arrangements must still be verified through me directly." "Of course, Holly. Should I add Derek to our authorized contact list?" "Yes, but with limited authorization. He can communicate about minor details, but venue changes, vendor modifications, or emergency protocols still need my approval." I spent the next hour reviewing every aspect of the retreat logistics with Janet, ensuring that the resort staff understood both Derek's new role and the limitations of his authority. Then I positioned myself in the resort lobby to observe Derek's arrival. Derek arrived at 8:30 in a BMW filled with luggage and accompanied by Sarah. He approached the front desk with the confident demeanor of someone who believed he was in charge of a successful operation. "Good morning. I'm Derek Thompson, coordinating the Martinez family retreat this weekend." The desk clerk, who had been briefed about the management structure, responded professionally. "Mr. Thompson, welcome to Clearwater Resort, Miss. Martinez has already completed the primary check-in procedures, but I'd be happy to provide you with any additional information you need." Derek's expression shifted slightly as he processed this information. He had expected to arrive as the primary coordinator, but instead discovered that I had already established operational control. "Miss Martinez is here?" "Oh, yes. She's been working with our event staff since 6 this morning, finalizing arrangements for your group's arrival." Derek spent the next 20 minutes attempting to assert control over check-in procedures, transportation schedules, and meal arrangements. But every inquiry resulted in the same response. These details had already been coordinated by Miss Martinez, and any changes would need her approval. By 10 that morning, when the bulk of the family began arriving, Derek was visibly frustrated, and Sarah appeared confused about his actual level of authority. I watched from the resort's business center as my parents arrived with Tommy and his family. My father immediately approached Derek, clearly expecting him to provide information about the day's schedule and logistics. "Derek, how are the arrangements looking? Any issues with the check-in process or activity scheduling?" Derek's discomfort was apparent as he struggled to answer questions about plans he hadn't actually made. "Everything seems to be proceeding smoothly, Mr. Martinez. The resort staff has been very helpful with coordination." "Excellent. And the presentation set up for this evening? I'm eager to see how the business associates respond to your insights about family leadership." Derek nodded confidently, but I could see panic in his eyes. He had no idea how to manage the technical aspects of his presentation because he had never learned how our audio-visual systems worked or how to coordinate with resort staff for event setup. By noon, as more family members and business guests arrived, Derek's lack of practical knowledge was becoming apparent to observant family members. Madison approached me in the resort restaurant during lunch. "Holly, what are you doing here? I thought you weren't invited." "I'm here in my professional capacity, Madison." Derek requested my assistance with some technical coordination he couldn't handle independently. "Derek requested your help?" "Well, he realized that some aspects of event management require specialized knowledge and vendor relationships that he hasn't developed yet." Madison looked confused. "But I thought Derek was taking over the family business coordination." "Derek has wonderful ideas about business strategy, but implementing complex event logistics requires specific expertise. I'm here to make sure his presentation this evening succeeds. I had positioned myself as Derek's professional support rather than his rival, which made my presence seem helpful rather than competitive. The afternoon brought increasing evidence of Derek's incompetence. The helicopter tours were delayed because Derek didn't understand the scheduling system and had provided incorrect passenger information to the tour company. The spa appointments had to be rescheduled because Derek had misunderstood the booking procedures and double-booked several time slots. Each problem required intervention from me to resolve, as vendors and resort staff contacted me directly when Derek's instructions proved inadequate or confusing. By 4 that afternoon, my father was beginning to notice the pattern of problems and solutions. "Holly, I appreciate you stepping in to help with these coordination issues. Derek mentioned he might need some technical support." "Of course, Dad. Derek has excellent business insights, but event logistics can be quite complex. I'm happy to handle the operational details so he can focus on his presentation." I was giving Derek full credit for strategic thinking while positioning myself as indispensable for practical implementation. The culminating moment came at 6 that evening, when Derek's presentation was scheduled to begin in the resort's main conference room. I had spent the afternoon preparing 2 different technical setups, one that would work flawlessly if Derek understood basic audio-visual operation, and one that would fail spectacularly if he attempted to manage equipment he couldn't operate. Derek chose to handle the technical setup himself, apparently believing that event coordination was simpler than it actually was. As the family and business guests assembled in the conference room, Derek attempted to connect his laptop to the projection system, using procedures he had observed but never learned. The system immediately malfunctioned, producing audio feedback and display errors that created chaos in the room. Derek spent 10 minutes struggling with equipment while my parents and their business associates watched in growing embarrassment. Finally, my father asked me to resolve the technical problems. I fixed the system in 30 seconds using proper procedures Derek hadn't known existed. But the damage was done. Derek's presentation began 20 minutes late, in front of an audience that had witnessed his incompetence with basic professional tools. The presentation itself was worse than the technical failures. Derek had prepared a speech about family loyalty and business leadership, but his content was vague and generic, lacking specific knowledge about our company's operations or realistic strategies for business growth. When business associates asked detailed questions about our client base, service offerings, or operational procedures, Derek provided answers that revealed his superficial understanding of our company's actual functions. The final disaster came when Derek attempted to announce his appointment as Director of Family Relations. As he began describing his new role within the family business, I stood up in the back of the room. "Excuse me, Derek, but I think there might be some confusion about the business announcements this evening." The room turned toward me as I approached the front of the conference room. "Ladies and gentlemen, as the Senior Event Coordinator for Martinez Family Events, I need to address some regulatory and financial concerns that have emerged regarding this weekend's business discussions." Derek's face went white as I opened a folder containing documentation of his embezzlement and unauthorized access to company resources. It appears that some of the business development activities discussed this weekend were funded through inappropriate use of company resources, and some of the business intelligence shared was obtained through unauthorized access to confidential files. I handed copies of the financial evidence to my father and the business associates present. Additionally, I've been contacted by the Colorado Business Ethics Board regarding complaints about unauthorized recording of private business conversations, which could affect our company's professional licensing. Derek tried to interrupt, but I continued speaking with the professional authority I had developed over 7 years of managing high-stakes events. Under these circumstances, Martinez Family Events cannot proceed with any business announcements or personnel changes until these regulatory issues are resolved through proper legal channels. The room fell silent as my family and their guests processed this information. Derek's presentation had collapsed, his business credibility was destroyed, and his embezzlement was exposed in front of the people he had been trying to impress. But I wasn't finished. Finally, I want the family to know that I've been offered a position as senior partner with Complete Events Colorado, our primary competitor, who has been pursuing our client relationships and business strategies for several years. Given the circumstances this weekend, I'll be seriously considering that opportunity. My announcement created immediate concern among the business associates, who realized that losing me could jeopardize their relationships with our company. Derek's coronation had become his complete humiliation, while I had demonstrated both my professional value and my strategic intelligence. The aftermath of Derek's failed presentation unfolded with devastating swiftness. As the family and business guests dispersed from the conference room, Derek found himself completely isolated while people approached me with questions, concerns, and expressions of support. Sarah, Derek's girlfriend, was the first to abandon him. After witnessing his professional humiliation and learning about his embezzlement, she quietly gathered her belongings and left the resort without saying goodbye. Derek's fantasy of presenting himself and Sarah as a power couple within the family business evaporated in minutes. My father approached me in the resort lobby, his expression a mixture of embarrassment, confusion, and growing anger toward Derek. "Holly, can you explain what just happened in there?" I handed him a comprehensive folder containing evidence of Derek's misconduct. "Dad, Derek has been systematically deceiving our family for months. He's been using company funds for personal expenses, accessing business files without authorization, and providing false information about my professional performance." My father reviewed the documentation with increasing dismay. Bank records showing Derek's unauthorized expenses, security footage of his unsupervised visits to our office, copies of the false performance reports Derek had created about me. "Holly, why didn't you tell us about this earlier?" "Because I only discovered the full scope of Derek's manipulation yesterday. I wanted to gather complete evidence before making accusations that could damage family relationships unnecessarily." My mother joined us, having overheard our conversation. "Holly, sweetheart, we owe you an enormous apology. We were completely deceived by Derek's lies." "Mom, Derek didn't just deceive you. He weaponized your love for me against me, convincing you that excluding me was somehow protective or beneficial." Tommy approached our group, looking ashamed. "Holly, I'm so sorry about the vote. Derek convinced us that you were struggling professionally and that family pressure would make things worse for you." "Tommy, the vote wasn't the problem. The problem was that you made decisions about my life and career without talking to me directly." Over the next hour, each of my siblings approached me individually to apologize for their participation in Derek's manipulation. They had each been told slightly different versions of why my exclusion was necessary, and Derek had convinced them that they were protecting me from embarrassment rather than excluding me from family support. Madison was particularly upset. "Holly, Derek told me you had asked him to help convince the family to give you space during the divorce recovery. He said you were grateful that the family was being understanding about your need for distance." Derek had manipulated each family member by convincing them that his suggestions reflected my actual desires rather than his own agenda. The business associates who had attended the retreat were equally disturbed by Derek's deception. Robert Chen, owner of a successful catering company that had been considering partnerships with our business, approached me directly. "Miss Martinez, I've worked with your family's company for 3 years, and I've always been impressed by your professionalism and competence. Derek's behavior this weekend has been completely inappropriate and misleading." "Mr. Chen, I appreciate your confidence in my work. Derek's actions don't reflect the values or standards of Martinez family events." "I'm relieved to hear that. Frankly, if Derek had become your company's primary representative, I would have reconsidered our business relationship." Similar conversations occurred with other business guests, who expressed relief that Derek would not be representing our company in future dealings. By Saturday afternoon, Derek had been completely ostracized by my family and their business associates. He spent the remainder of the retreat alone in his room, while I resumed coordination of the weekend's activities. My father asked me to take over Derek's planned presentation time to discuss the actual future of our family business. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to clarify Martinez Family Events' actual business plans and leadership structure. As Senior Event Coordinator, I've been developing expansion strategies based on our established client relationships and operational expertise. I presented a comprehensive business plan that I had been developing for months, outlining realistic growth opportunities based on our actual strengths and resources. The business associates responded enthusiastically to my presentation, asking detailed questions about implementation timelines and partnership opportunities. After my presentation, my father announced that I would be promoted to Executive Director of Operations, with expanded authority over business development and family coordination. Holly has proven this weekend that she possesses the professional competence, family loyalty, and strategic thinking necessary to lead our company's growth into the future. The family and business guests applauded my promotion, while Derek remained notably absent from the announcement. On Sunday morning, as the retreat concluded, Derek made one final attempt to salvage his position. He approached me privately in the resort lobby. "Holly, I think there's been some misunderstanding about my intentions. I was genuinely trying to help the family business succeed." "Derek, you were trying to replace me using lies and manipulation. There's no misunderstanding about that. What can I do to make this right?" "You can resign from any involvement with Martinez family events, return the business materials you've inappropriately accessed, and stop contacting my family members about professional matters." Derek nodded reluctantly, realizing he had no leverage remaining and no support from my family. As the family members prepared to leave Clearwater Resort, my parents approached me together. "Holly," my mother said, "we want you to know that the annual family retreat tradition will be modified to ensure that no family member is ever excluded based on secondhand information or outside manipulation. And," my father added, "your role in the family business will be protected by formal documentation that prevents any unauthorized personnel changes." The weekend ended with my family relationships restored, my professional position strengthened, and Derek completely removed from our lives. 6 months later, Martinez Family Events had expanded into 3 new markets, hired 4 additional coordinators, and increased our annual revenue by 40%. My promotion to executive director had proved beneficial for both family relationships and business success. Derek's attempt to take over my life had resulted in his complete elimination from my family's trust and support. His manipulation had been exposed, his professional credibility was destroyed, and his relationship with Sarah had ended in embarrassment. Meanwhile, I had learned valuable lessons about family communication, professional boundaries, and the importance of verifying information before making decisions about people I loved. The annual family retreat became a symbol of reconciliation rather than exclusion, and my family developed new protocols for discussing concerns directly rather than relying on outside influence. Most importantly, I had discovered that defending my worth with facts, integrity, and strategic action was more powerful than accepting unfair treatment or hoping that others would recognize my value without evidence. Sometimes the greatest strength comes not from avoiding family conflict, but from standing up for your rightful place with intelligence, grace, and unwavering commitment to the truth. The experience taught me that true family loyalty means protecting each other from manipulation, not enabling it. And that professional competence speaks louder than family politics when people have the opportunity to witness both in action. My parents learned that excluding family members based on secondhand information creates more problems than it solves. My siblings learned that voting on someone's inclusion without understanding the full situation is both hurtful and unwise. And Derek learned that replacing someone requires actually being able to do their job, not just convincing people that you can do it better. Our family emerged stronger, more honest, and more committed to direct communication and mutual support. The retreat that was designed to exclude me became the foundation for rebuilding trust and respect within our family relationships. I hope this story encourages you to stand up for your worth when faced with manipulation and betrayal. Have you ever had to fight back against someone who tried to turn your family against you? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Please like this video if it resonated with your own family challenges. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming betrayal and manipulation. And share this with anyone who needs encouragement to fight for their rightful place in their family or workplace. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that your worth isn't determined by others' opinions, but by your actions and integrity. Keep fighting for the respect you deserve, and never let anyone convince you that you're less valuable than you actually are.